Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, epidemiologist, biostatistician, faculty member. And in this lecture, I'm going to be going over diabetes affects Alzheimer's disease and related dementia mortality in African Americans. However, before I go ahead, I wanted to say that it is with great honor that I'm presenting here at the American Public Health Association in Atlanta, Georgia. And I wanted to thank everyone that has made this possible. First of all, there is no disclosures to report. Objectives are understanding the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease, and then applying geospatial distribution of diabetes and Alzheimer's disease, and then understanding how Alzheimer's disease affects African Americans differently. That is the focus of the presentation, how ethnicity plays a role. So I wanted to, I wove that throughout the presentation. Here's the abstract. I know this is a busy slide, so I'm going to be explaining parts of this as I go along. So what is important is that the notion that African Americans experience mortality and they experience Alzheimer's disease 2 times as much as Caucasians is something that is not known to many people. This is why this is called the silent epidemic, and this is true because if you look at pharmacological commercials by drug companies, a lot of times you'll only see white individuals that are have Alzheimer's. So 1 in 8 individuals 65 years and older will have Alzheimer's disease. And so this costs Americans $20 billion. So with future population increase, estimates indicate that 13.5 million individuals will have Alzheimer's disease by 2050. So although race-based norms are helpful for increasing diagnostic accuracy in clinical settings, their use makes a number of assumptions about biological constructions of race that might lead to erroneous and potentially harmful interpretations of underlying racial differences. One example of this, if you think about how to measure chronic kidney disease, there was a race-based adjustment there, and a lot of times some of the more indicative signs were missed because there was a varied calculation for African Americans. And we see this again and again in many of the risk scoring systems. So these are 2 papers. One was titled Black and White Individuals Differ in Dementia Prevalence, Risk Factors, and Symptomatic Presentation. And then Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease-related dementias in African Americans focus on caregivers. So this was talking about how caregivers have experienced more stress when they're African Americans than that of Caucasians. So the dementia prevalence and risk factors is actually different, and there's neuropsychiatric symptoms that are different as well, like cognition. I'm going to be going over that in a moment here. So not only is the prevalence rate, I wanted to bring your attention to this portion. Not only is the prevalence rate 14%, this is actually even as Hispanics, the rate of Alzheimer's disease is 12% of all individuals age 65 and above, and then only 10% for non-Hispanic white. Some of the symptoms that they experience in Alzheimer's disease is memory loss, main thing. There's some respiratory infections that take place. Ischemia is a cause for some of the ADRD. And then urinary tract infections. So looking at, and let me clear this before this covers the presentation. So taking a look at this, in African Americans, health disparities individuals, African Americans are 44% more likely to die from a stroke. Obesity, 23% more likely to be obese. Diabetes, 72% more likely to be diabetic. And then heart disease, 25% likely of dying from heart disease. And then, so African Americans have 2 times as likely to have Alzheimer's, and then Latino Americans are 1.5 times as likely. I don't want to go through the percentage of Latino Americans in this presentation due to the focus being on African Americans. However, this is interesting to note here. So the number of African Americans age 65 and over will more than double by 2030. From 2.7 million in 1995 to 6.9 million by 2030. Vascular dementia, African Americans have a higher rate of than white Americans. 65% of African American Medicare beneficiaries have hypertension, compared to 51% of white beneficiaries. So African Americans who are evaluated have a much higher rate of false positive results. At the same time, there is substantial evidence of underreporting of dementia among African Americans. So Black Americans are 2 times as likely to develop dementia, as I stated in the previous slide. Black participants with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias had more risk factors to for the disease, as well as greater cognitive impairment and symptom severity than white participants. So this is important to note. Greater cognitive impairment and symptom severity. Black older adults delay help for memory problems since they believe this is a normal part of aging. And then Black participants were about twice as likely as white participants to experience delusions and hallucinations. So let's hone in on the cellular level and see what is going on with the biomarkers. Focus on caregivers first. Growing recognition that ADRD poses a significant stress on African American caregivers compared to white caregivers. And then the historic legacy of racism, whether it was slavery to Jim Crow laws, to segregation of schools, all of those, and then poor social cohesion, redlining, all of those have led to different access points, and how African Americans trust or mistrust the medical establishment. There's several genes that have been identified that are uniquely found in the African American community compared to white individuals, and this is important. Showed that 2 lipid metabolic related genes are responsible for this, and apolipoprotein E, ApoE, and ABCA7 are the primary heritable causes of Alzheimer's disease in African Americans. So this ApoE had higher risk in homozygotes among white people, 12 times higher risk in homozygotes. So ApoE allele was linked to a 2 to 3 times higher risk of Alzheimer's disease in heterozygotes and a 12 times higher risk in homozygotes among white people. However, the ApoE allele is more common in African Americans, and homozygosity is strongly linked to Alzheimer's disease in African Americans. So among African Americans ages 70 and older, 21.3 or a quarter are living with Alzheimer's. Black Americans are twice as likely as white older Americans to have Alzheimer's, and this is something that is a major theme, take-home theme to think about. Only 20% of Black Americans say they have no barriers to optimal health care and support for ADRD. So the rest do have barriers. 55% of Blacks think that significant loss of cognitive abilities or memory is a natural part of aging. and recognizing symptoms is very important. So now I'm going to talk about some of the geospatial aspects in here. And some of the geospatial aspects that are important to note is that right here in downtown Atlanta, there's 74 years of life expectancy. As you go up north, in the Druid Hills area, Buckhead, life expectancy starts to go up to 84. And then right next to here, when you go in this area, the life expectancy is 71, 72. So all of downtown people are living only into the 70s, while above they're living into their 80s. So looking at the geospatial distribution, over in the west area of Texas, there's ADRD. However, there's not as much going on in Alabama and Mississippi in terms of Alzheimer's disease. Again, looking into the southern region, one possible explanation might be because a lot of elderly individuals retire and go to Florida. Also in the Northeast, there's a higher preponderance, and even though there's not as much poverty when you look there, and then in the Ohio and Chicago area. And then taking a look at diabetes prevalence, there seems to be a lot more diabetes prevalence in Mississippi and Alabama. However, there was not Alzheimer's disease there. Some of the areas that have Alzheimer's disease is a lot more portions of Georgia, even Texas, the other half of Texas that where there was Alzheimer's also experiences diabetes. So in some places there's a relationship, and we're going to take a look at the relationship map in a second. So the darker areas have a relationship between diabetes and Alzheimer's disease. There's not too many dark areas. However, if you look at the Midwest, there are some areas that have both diabetes and Alzheimer's disease, and so does Georgia, southern Georgia. So taking a look at how we quantified this in terms of population health, let's take a look at some of these statistics that were provided. So this was the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, ages 20 years and older, and taking a look at follow-up through 2019. And there was self-reported information for ethnicity and assessment of diabetes. So what we were looking at is that diabetes leads to overall mortality, and then so how there's a relationship here. So the relationship of ethnicity on Alzheimer's disease related mortality, and how diabetes influences this. Couple things going on. So looking at ethnicity on Alzheimer's disease, and then diabetes, how that modifies that. So when we looked at this, we found that percent mortality among individuals was 0.58% among Caucasians and 0.045% among African Americans. Now, what is interesting is that age-adjusted, sex-adjusted hazard ratio was not significant. However, with adjustment, there was an elevation here, looking at 1.84 and 1.86. Just to interpret this again, this portion here, the adjusted hazard ratio was elevated. Adjusted hazard ratio was elevated 1.84, while not significant, not statistically significant, when there was African Americans that did not have diabetes, then this was closer to 1. So the finding is that individuals that had both that were both African American and had diabetes were experiencing more Alzheimer's disease related mortality than African Americans who did not have diabetes. They did not experience as much mortality. That's the take-home message there. So in this study, we determined that ethnicity has an important role in Alzheimer's disease-related mortality. More importantly, African American individuals with diabetes are 84% higher likelihood associated with Alzheimer's disease-related mortality from Caucasians with the same disease. And then preventative measures must incorporate ethnicity as a consideration. So 65%, just taking this home, percent of African Americans beneficiaries had hypertension, a much higher rate than for Caucasian beneficiaries, 51%, and Hispanic beneficiaries, 56%. And then the presence of APOE E4 allele is a determinant of Alzheimer's disease risk in whites, but African Americans and Hispanics have an increased frequency of Alzheimer's disease regardless of their APOE genotype. And this is different studies. I know in another study, APOE E4 was shown to be more harmful and a higher preponderance. So there's still some controversy as to what the exact mechanism is here. So age-standardized annual incidence rates were significantly lower among Yoruba than among African Americans for dementia. So this is important as well. Africans that live in Africa are not as likely to experience dementia as African Americans living in the United States. Environmental and genetic factors determine the occurrence of dementia and indicates multi-generational trauma. So a lot of the racism and the poor understanding of the poor legacy of slavery and the poor access due to mistrust of the medical establishment are reasons that there's disparities. And then there's need to include African Americans in clinical trials. These are the all of the references here, and thank you for listening.